What does the Roman Colosseum, built thousands of years ago, have in common with Spain's brand new ultra-modern international airport? Both are monumental megaprojects of their time, yet each has spent much of its history largely unused or serving a purpose far from what was originally intended. Such things have often happened in history. Some mind-blowing projects become timeless symbols of the era, while others turn into abandoned sites painful to look at. In modern times, the scale of such derelict buildings sometimes strikes the imagination. We are setting off on a journey through airports without flights, stadiums without spectators, and even entire cities without inhabitants. And today, you will learn, where can you find another Paris with the Eiffel Tower? Is it possible to buy an international airport for the price of a used car? Which city has Buddha's tooth stored there, and why don't people want to live there? And why will China never build super tall skyscrapers again? Top 10 most useless megaprojects. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to see even more interesting content. Let's start our journey in Europe. Spain. Early 2000s. It was a time of economic boom, prosperity, and skyrocketing global tourism. Real estate is being snapped up by investment portfolios faster than tickets to a Taylor Swift concert. And investments in infrastructure seem like a gold mine. A group of private investors decides to build another international airport in Spain. At the time, the main airport in the Spanish capital Madrid was already overloaded, and the new one was envisioned as an alternative. It may seem that nothing could go wrong, but everything did, from the very beginning. The place for the airport was not well chosen. It is in the vicinity of Ciudad Real, a small town as much as 200 kilometers, 124 miles from Madrid, and that was already a huge issue. But let's learn about the other details first. More than 1 billion euros has been spent on this airport. That's about the cost of a decent fleet of budget airlines. The project featured all the modern stuff. A 4-kilometer-long runway capable of hosting the world's largest airliners, including the huge A380. A state-of-the-art terminal designed to serve 2 million passengers a year. A plan for gradual expansion to a 10 million passenger airport. A station for the Madrid-Sevilla high-speed railway line that was planned to be 300 meters away. It would have made it possible to easily get by train from Madrid to the new airport in an hour. There was even a covered passageway leading to it built in advance. But what went wrong and when did it happen? Firstly, the completion and opening were delayed for 5 years due to protests from ecologists. Nearby was the national park Tablas de Daimiel, where rare bird species nested. As a result, the airport had to be partially rebuilt. Secondly, for many different reasons, the railway station has not been built. Thirdly, even before the pompous opening of Ciudad Real, Madrid's Barajas airport was successfully expanded in 2006. And as we stated before, the new airport was partly intended to take over the overload of Barajas. As a result, Ciudad Real at first served mainly residents of surrounding villages. Meanwhile, the global financial crisis has hit. It would have been possible to survive the hard times if there had been decent traffic, but Ciudad Real, for all its scale, turned out to be a backwater, where only a couple of airlines tried to fly. Air Berlin, Ryanair, and Spanish Vueling, which even received subsidies for this. 3 years later, the airport was closed, and it began to gradually deteriorate. The management company accumulated debts of 300 million euros and went bankrupt. The property was put up for sale for 89 million euros, 12 times cheaper than what was invested in the construction. However, no one was willing to buy the airport even for that price. There were ridiculous offers. For example, a group of British and Asian investors were ready to buy the airport for 10,000 euros to build a logistics center for Chinese companies nearby. Once again, they offered 10,000 euros for the brand new international airport. In all seriousness, it's like the price of a used mediocre car. Eventually, however, the airport was sold for 56.2 million euros to Ciudad Real International Airport SL, a company created specifically for this deal. It reopened in September 2019, though not for scheduled flights, but as a storage and maintenance base. And that's when another unexpected twist happened. The COVID-19 pandemic struck. The thing that had shocked, horrified, and stunned the whole world suddenly revitalized Ciudad Real Airport. You surely remember what happened to air travel at that time, don't you? Yes, their numbers have decreased significantly. Ciudad Real became a parking lot for 80 airliners of the local airlines Vueling and Iberia, which had stopped flying, but even more for foreign airlines, South African, Aer Lingus, Virgin Atlantic, Cathay Pacific. The reason for this is that Spain is perfect for long-term aircraft storage thanks to its dry, warm climate. And it is still utilized for this purpose. Plus, it's used as a place for dismantling retired airliners, carrying out maintenance, making movies, and commercials. By the way, the famous meme video with Jean-Claude Van Damme doing a split between two moving Volvo trucks was filmed here. So a seemingly stillborn megaproject has survived and is actually doing quite well, and even shines in the movie industry. The best illustration for the slogan, never give up. And now we move on to the next item of our top 10 most useless megaprojects. And for that, we're flying to Southeast Asia. What do you associate with the word capital? Probably a bustling metropolis with crowds of people and tourists. But Myanmar decided that the better choice would be grandiose infrastructure, giant avenues, luxurious government buildings, and almost empty streets and houses where you rarely see people. Welcome to Naypyidaw, the capital of Myanmar, which looks like a revived image of an ideal city for an architectural magazine, but turned out to be a symbol of emptiness in reality. So, how did it all start? Naypyidaw was established on a new site near Pyongyang, about 320 kilometers, 200 miles north of the then capital Yangon. Construction began in 2002. The military government hired at least 25 construction companies for this ambitious project. The city didn't even have an official name at the time. It was only on March 27, 2006, Armed Forces Day, that they announced its official name, Naypyidaw, which means Abode of the King. The construction was completed by 2012. The obvious question is why? What was wrong with the old capital? The official explanation for moving the capital was that Yangon had become overpopulated and there was little space for future expansion of government offices. But it is rumored that the goal of the military was to build for itself and other elites an impregnable citadel capable of withstanding foreign invasion or popular uprisings. Whatever the reason, the project cost a huge amount of money. Some reports suggest that the construction expenses reached about $4 billion, and according to many independent evaluations, this figure seems to be greatly underestimated. After all, one must admit, the result is really impressive. Here are just some of the striking features of the city. 20-lane wide avenue for cars. Presumably, it was designed so that a military plane could land there if necessary. The state-of-the-art Myanmar Parliament building, one of the largest government complexes in the world. A zoo with 1,500 animals, including even penguins, for which Antarctic climate is specially provided. Aqua park, safari park, 2 golf courses, several shopping centers, the mind-blowing landmark Upatasanti Pagoda, which houses one of the priceless relics of Buddhism, the Tooth of Buddha. Also, the city is very smartly divided into functional zones: residential, government, commercial, and recreational. By the way, the authorities have taken a rather unusual approach to residential development. In total, there are 1,200 four-story apartment buildings in the city. Residential areas are thoroughly organized, and apartments are distributed according to rank and marital status. Even the roofs of apartment buildings bear color coding according to the jobs of their residents. For example, employees of the Ministry of Health live in buildings with blue roofs, while those working for the Ministry of Agriculture live in buildings with green roofs. Approximately 50 mansions house high-ranking government officials. Military officers and other key employees live 11 kilometers (6.8 miles) away from the ordinary civil servants in a complex that is rumored to consist of tunnels and bunkers. The area is closed to the public. There is also a military base in the city, which cannot be accessed by citizens or other personnel without written authorization. However, this sweeping scale and true splendor collides with a simple reality. Hardly anyone lives in Naypyidaw. Well, on paper, the population is considerable, about 1 million people. But it's impossible to say for sure whether that figure is real or not. Visitors say that there are almost no people on the long, beautiful avenues, and you can rarely see a car on the 20-lane highways. And most of the residents are government employees, military personnel, and their families. Not even all of the ministry mansions are used, and many are falling into disrepair. For comparison, the former capital Yangon has a population of over 5 million. But how did it go wrong? Why didn't this megaproject succeed? First of all, there's the problem of accessibility, of purely physical nature. The city is located in a remote place, far away from major transportation routes. Getting to Naypyidaw requires a long drive from the nearest big cities. The idea that its central location would be convenient for everyone has clearly failed. The second point is social isolation. There is almost no cultural life in the city. And much of the infrastructure, including hotels and malls, is virtually unused. This creates a vicious cycle. 1. There are few people here. 2. People from other regions are not willing to come here because see point 1. The locals admit that Naypyidaw resembles an empty resort during the off-season more than a real capital city. And finally, questionable rationales. The relocation of the capital has not been worthwhile in terms of improving living conditions. On the contrary, it has widened the gap between the elite and the ordinary people who remained in the less wealthy regions of the country. Therefore, Naypyidaw is still a source of much controversy. On the one hand, it has become a symbol of the elite's wastefulness and insularity from the real life. On the other hand, the city's infrastructure is so good that it could be useful in the future if Myanmar's population grows and the economic situation improves. For now, Naypyidaw remains, maybe not fully pointless, but obviously not a very reasonable mega-project. But it's a great place for racing through empty streets. This fact was demonstrated in an episode of Top Gear, where the hosts were astonished to find the city's roads completely devoid of cars. The next highly controversial megaproject in our top is also located in the same part of the world, in Malaysia. On the coast of this country, next to Singapore, there is an ambitious project called Forest City. A city of the future that was supposed to fulfill the dream of living in harmony with nature. But the reality turned out to be not as idyllic as the commercials promised. Instead of a green paradise, investors faced empty buildings and strict regulations. The Forest City project was designed as a large-scale eco-city on artificially created islands. The main idea was to create a modern, green, high-tech space where residents can live, work, and recreate in harmony with nature. What does Forest City look like in general terms? Everything is located on 4 artificial islands, with a total area of about 14 square kilometers. The projected population is 700,000 people. Plans include high-tech buildings equipped with vertical gardens, solar panels, and smart infrastructure. And now, the drumroll please, the budget. The expenses for Myanmar's new capital city of Naypyidaw, the one we just covered, look like pocket change compared to this mega project. Chinese developer Country Garden alone has invested $100 billion into the venture. The city, located just a few kilometers from Singapore, was supposed to attract wealthy investors by offering luxury homes with sea views, cutting-edge infrastructure, and a favorable location. But despite the sounding promises, the project has faced a number of challenges. The first, most obvious problem is overly high price. The average cost of housing in Forest City was unaffordable for most locals. As a result, demand for apartments from Malaysians remained minimal. The cost of housing here was higher than in other prestigious areas of the country, but the infrastructure of the city remained underdeveloped. Due to this, the project was criticized, as it was obvious that it was designed for foreign buyers, and more specifically, Chinese investors. And well, they were sort of buying houses here until they ran into strict regulations and restrictions. In 2018, Malaysia changed regulations for foreigners, limiting their ability to purchase real estate in the country. This dramatically reduced the demand for housing in Forest City. Political changes have also hampered. Malaysia's new Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad openly criticized the project, calling it a symbol of superfluity and dependence on Chinese investors. This fact deterred many potential buyers. Finally, ironically, this green project has proven to be the opposite, highly controversial in environmental terms. The creation of artificial islands caused concern among specialists. It was noted that the development activities had damaged the marine ecosystem, including mangroves and fisheries. And so, having faced a number of challenges, Forest City remains unfinished and virtually empty in 2024. To be clear, only 15% of the entire project has been built, and according to the latest estimates, just over 1% of the total development has been occupied. The infrastructure works only partially. Instead of a thriving metropolis, the project has turned into a kind of ghost town, where luxurious skyscrapers sit in silence and emptiness. Having invested $100 billion, Country Garden not only failed to recoup its investment, but also accumulated $200 billion in debt. Nevertheless, in an interview with the BBC, representatives of the developer stated that they are optimistic and believe that the plan will be fully implemented. They are still looking for new investors and are also developing the domestic market by targeting tourists and renters. To visit the next controversial megaproject, we now head to China. Goldin Finance 117, or simply 117, is one of China's most ambitious construction projects, which promise to be an architectural marvel and a symbol of economic prosperity. Instead, however, it has become one of the most notable examples of unfulfilled hope. It all started with a grandiose idea to build the second largest skyscraper in the world. Located in the city of Tianducheng, Goldin Finance 117 was supposed to be an engineering marvel. Just look at these parameters. The building is 597 meters, 1,957 feet tall, 128 floors above ground, 117 of which are intended for housing, hotels, and commercial space. The cost of the project was estimated at around $8.4 billion. It was envisioned that the building would symbolize the growth of the region's economy and would attract major businesses. Construction began in 2008, and the skyscraper was planned to be completed in 2014. Everything looks perfect on paper, right? But despite a promising start, Goldin Finance 117 still remains unfinished, and here's why. The start of construction coincided with the global economic recession. The main investor of the project, Goldin Properties, faced serious financial difficulties. After the initial upsurge, their revenues began to drop sharply, and investors lost interest in the expensive skyscraper. The overloaded real estate market also had an impact. There were already many empty office buildings in the Tianjin region, with demand for such large projects remaining low. Goldin Finance 117 simply did not find its audience. In addition, Chinese authorities have tightened policies on large-scale construction projects in an attempt to reduce the overheated real estate market. This has led to a reduction in financing for many projects of this kind. In addition, in the process of realization, the project constantly ran into big and small technical difficulties that exacerbated the dire situation. Today, Goldin Finance 117 is practically complete. The building is erected, the exterior is finished, but the interior is not completed. The skyscraper has not been commissioned, and much of the engineering systems have not been installed. It is dubbed the Frozen Giant that towers above the Tianducheng skyline but remains empty. So far, there have been no significant efforts to restart the construction, and locals see it as a symbol of the decline of China's construction boom. Goldin Finance 117 and other failed skyscraper projects in China have caused the government to ban the construction of buildings taller than 500 meters, 1,640 feet. If 117 is ever completed, it will be one of the last super tall skyscrapers in China, at least for the foreseeable future. And our next project is situated in, well, you're about to see it. Imagine you're standing at the foot of the Eiffel Tower, enjoying the morning sun, and all around you are majestic boulevards drowning in green. Yes, Paris is gorgeous, but it's nowhere near Paris. It's Tianducheng, a small city in China trying to pretend to be the French capital. Tianducheng was designed as a grand residential project in the early 2000s for 10,000 people, a Chinese Paris with houses inspired by the architecture of Baron Haussmann, spacious alleys, and a small replica of the Eiffel Tower. Well, maybe not so small. 108 meters is quite a big deal, even though it is 3 times smaller than the original. It was a challenge for local developers to create not just a city, but a symbol of European sophistication and style. But the plans clashed with the harsh reality. Housing was too expensive even for the middle class, and those who could afford it did not hasten to move to a place that was relatively remote from major business centers. As a result, the project became popular as a ghost town. Despite this reputation, it is somewhat an exaggeration. Let's explore some of the popular myths. Yes, in the early years, there were only a couple thousand people living in this city. But over the following years, the occupancy rate has grown significantly. In 2017, there were already about 30,000 people living in the city. Wait, but it was designed for 10,000. How come? The thing is that when settlement revived, the project started to be actively expanded. But they overdid it, and now there are a lot of empty houses again. There is no exact data on the population of the city in 2024, but it is certainly not less than it was in 2017. Overall, the city has become a popular destination for weddings, photo shoots, and tourists. The Eiffel Tower replica and French gardens attract tourists who dream of experiencing the romantic atmosphere of Paris without leaving China. So the city is gradually springing to life. The number of inhabitants grows, stores and other infrastructure emerge. There is hope that it will prosper after all. Unlike the next mega project, which is also located in China, Shang Yun. Another ambitious project that was intended to be an icon of urban innovation. The city was conceived as a symbol of modernization and a new wave of urbanization, but in practice, it proved to be another ghost town. The Shang Yun International City project was initiated in the mid-2010s. The goal was to create an ultra-modern city with well-designed infrastructure for 200,000 people, inviting residents of the region and international companies. What went wrong? Despite its ambitious goals, Shang Yun quickly ran into a number of problems that turned it into a near-empty city. The first problem was pretty classic: unfortunate choice of location and insufficient demand for housing. High real estate prices proved unaffordable for most potential buyers. But even without regard to geography, the city itself had infrastructure problems from the very beginning. While everything looked perfect on paper, in reality, the city suffers from a lack of basic services. Shang Yun, like many other ghost towns, failed to align the project's ambitious scale with the real need for real estate. Today, Shang Yun is a nearly empty city. Much of the buildings stand without residents. Stores and offices are empty. The city streets, designed for heavy traffic, remain virtually traffic-free. Now, to see the next failed megaproject, we'll have to sneak into one of the most closed countries in the world, North Korea. Here, an impressive 105-story skyscraper, the Ryugyong Hotel, rises on the Pyongyang skyline. This colossal project was conceived as a symbol of North Korea's economic and technological breakthrough. But in reality, it has become rather an illustration of unrealized ambitions. Construction of the hotel began in 1987, when the Cold War was still relevant in its original sense. North Korea's leaders wanted to demonstrate their power to the world and to surpass neighboring countries, including South Korea, which was preparing for the 1988 Olympics. The building is 330 meters tall, which makes it one of the tallest hotel structures in the world. 105 floors with rooms, restaurants, entertainment areas, and a revolving restaurant at the top. Construction was supposed to be completed by 1989, but the schedule has been revised several times. Despite the ambitions, the project eventually came to naught for a number of reasons. First, an economic crisis began. In the early 1990s, North Korea suffered a devastating economic collapse after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, which had been its main trading partner. Funding for the project virtually ceased. Secondly, technical challenges arose. The building was constructed using outdated technology and materials, raising concerns about its structural safety. Thirdly, the plans were not at all realistic. Even if the hotel were completed, it would be extremely problematic to fill it. North Korea does not garner the tourist flows required for such a huge hotel complex. Finally, political isolation, international sanctions, and the country's singularity made the process even more difficult to realize. After decades of downtime, the building was revitalized in 2008 thanks to an investment by the Egyptian company Orascom, which installed a glass facade. From the outside, the Ryugyong looks complete and even quite impressive, but inside, it remains unfinished. In 2018, North Korean media announced that the hotel would be used as a business and tourist center, but it never actually opened. The building is occasionally used for light shows, but remains vacant. The next questionable megaproject in our top is on the other continent, in Africa. We head to Nigeria. Located on the coast of the port city of Lagos, the Eko Atlantic project was meant to symbolize progress and, at the same time, address the problem of coastal erosion. The construction of Eko Atlantic began in 2008 on an artificially reclaimed area of 10 square kilometers along the Atlantic coast. The project had more than ambitious goals. First, it was intended to prevent erosion of the Lagos coastline, which was endangering the city. Second, it was envisioned as a financial hub which would have potentially attracted international companies and provide jobs for 150,000 people. In addition, it encompassed luxury residential estates, office buildings, malls, and beach areas. The lavish city was designed to accommodate 250,000 residents. So, what went wrong? Despite the big claims and ambitious plans, the realization of the project faced serious difficulties that cast doubt on it. The most obvious one is the unaffordability of housing for the local population, just like in the case of Forest City. Real estate prices in Eko Atlantic proved exorbitant for most Nigerians. The city targeted the elite and foreigners, neglecting the huge demand for affordable housing. Another important point is the lack of infrastructure. Despite the skyscrapers with beautiful facades that were built, much of the infrastructure, including roads, utilities, and public spaces, remained unfinished. Without these elements, the city could not fully function. In addition, environmental and social issues got in the way. The creation of the artificial island raised concerns among ecologists. There were cases of flooding in areas of Lagos, which according to critics was exacerbated by the construction of Eko Atlantic. Also, the project did not take into account the needs and reality of the majority of Lagos residents. The project has become an example of the divide between the dreams of the elite and reality. In a country where millions of people live in poverty, building a luxury city for many seemed like an abomination. The project is not yet complete, and the developers claim that Eko Atlantic will succeed in realizing its potential in the long term. There are plans to attract international investors and improve the infrastructure. And now, to see the next flashy but failed megaproject, we need to fly to another continent and land in Brazil. Arena da Amazônia is a state-of-the-art local stadium built for the 2014 FIFA World Cup in one of the most unusual places on Earth, in the heart of the Amazon. The majestic arena is impressive in its design and scale, but today it has become a symbol of excessive costs and unsustainable planning. The stadium is located in the city of Manaus, the capital of the state of Amazonas. At the time of construction in 2014, the project cost Brazil about $300 million. It was built on the place of the old Vilvadao Stadium. The new venue had a capacity of 44,000 spectators and featured a unique architectural design. The facade and roof of the arena are made in the form of intertwined threads, symbolizing the straw baskets traditionally crafted in the region. The idea was for the World Cup to cover the entire Brazil, including remote regions. Manaus, a few thousand kilometers from the country's biggest cities, was supposed to become a hallmark of Brazil's diversity. The stadium features a restaurant, luxury suites, underground parking facilities, and access for people with special needs. There is a strong focus on sustainability. The stadium is designed to utilize natural ventilation to reduce energy consumption. It also includes an on-site rainwater recycling system and wastewater treatment facilities to minimize water consumption. In addition, over 95% of the material from the demolition of the old stadium was recycled. During the World Cup, Arena da Amazônia hosted only 4 matches, including iconic games such as England vs. Italy and USA vs. Portugal. But once the World Cup was over, the problems became apparent. First, the choice of location itself raised a lot of questions. Manaus could only be reached by air or river. Next, the soccer culture. Soccer was not very popular in the region, and the local teams had never participated in the major national leagues. After the tournament, the arena was barely used. Local teams playing in the lower leagues could not attract even a tenth of the spectators needed to fill the huge stadium. In 2016, at the time of the Olympic Games in Brazil, Arena da Amazônia was used for only a few matches, but it remained nearly empty after that. The high maintenance costs soon became evident. The remoteness of the arena made it extremely expensive to operate. Monthly maintenance cost $500,000. There were also economic and social challenges. The construction itself was accompanied by protests from the local population demanding better education, healthcare, and infrastructure rather than luxury facilities for temporary use. Today, Arena da Amazônia is still hardly used. Occasionally, it is leased for concerts or events, but this is the exception rather than the usual practice. The next ambitious but failed project on our top list is in the USA. The Satsop nuclear power plant in Washington state was a project that promised to change the region's energy future. But today, it looks like a monument to missed opportunities. In the 1970s, the U.S. energy industry was booming. Responding to growing energy needs, Washington state announced the construction of 5 nuclear power plants under the Washington Public Power Supply System (WPPSS) program. 2 of them, WNP3 and WNP5, became known as the Satsop nuclear power plant. Construction began in 1977 and the scope was all out. The plant included 2 nuclear reactors with a combined capacity of more than 2,200 megawatts. Work progressed quickly. Concrete cooling towers and main buildings were erected. Underground tunnels and most of the remaining infrastructure were built. But despite the promises, by the mid-1980s, construction of the Satsop NPP was frozen. There were several reasons for this. First of all, financial difficulties. Construction costs far exceeded initial estimates, and demand for electricity had declined following the economic downturn. In 1983, WPPSS declared a default on its $2.25 billion in bonds, which stirred the public. The WPPSS program became known as one of the biggest financial disasters in U.S. history. All of this was overlaid with a shift in public opinion. After the 3 Mile Island accident in 1979, public opinion of nuclear energy deteriorated dramatically. People began to fear its environmental and social consequences. Another issue was the demand decline. The economic downturn of the 1980s reduced the need for electricity, making such large projects redundant. And technical difficulties and schedule delays ended the project. By the time construction stopped in 1983, WNP3 and WNP5 were only 76% and 16% complete, respectively. Instead of becoming the largest energy facility in the region, the Satsop NPP became an abandoned complex of concrete structures. Years later, the facility has become somewhat useful. It's now an industrial park. Companies rent premises for production and warehouses, plus it's also a training ground for the rescue services. In addition, the Satsop NPP is now popular among movie makers. The gloomy concrete structures have become the scenery for movies and commercials. By the way, some scenes from Transformers were filmed here.